Asian countries have been revising their power development plans to reduce their reliance on coal. Many are switching to gas and renewables. CNA's Chandni Vatvani recently caught up with Thorbjörn Fors, who is a senior vice president and managing director of Siemens Energy in Asia Pacific, to find out what the company is doing to combat climate change in Asia.
Well, if we start with some of the challenges first, there are still countries investing heavily in coal-fired power plants, and we as Siemens Energy have stepped out from coal. So if we take Indonesia, if we take India, the recent years have been record high production of coal, and that's a concern to us because there are alternatives, and we believe in the alternatives. There are other parts of Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific in general where there are some very encouraging progress. So if we take again Singapore with the hydrogen and ammonia activities, we see further up in the north of Asia Pacific, in Korea and Japan, a lot of hydrogen activities coming along as well. We see it down in Australia, a lot of wind and renewables and solar coming into play. So, there are encouraging signs across the wider region. I think the appetite is there, but there are some fundamentals we are still not seeing the sufficient progress in. For example, the financing and the support that is needed for industrial actors to actually have the appetite to go forward. But also when it comes to other incentives, for example, tax regimes for CO2 emissions. So some of these fundamental policies are not progressing with a desired pace.
Does energy security threaten to derail energy transition? Are the two at odds with each other?
I wouldn't say so necessarily, but I think they can be combined, and you can find value by creating value together. But there are challenges to meet the energy transition in this region, particularly having in mind that we have 75% of all power generation is fossil-based today. So it's a tremendous task for all of us.
If we look at East Asia, how different are the opportunities for Siemens Energy there in comparison to those in this region?
I think what is unique almost for the whole Asian continent versus, for example, Europe or the Americas is that you have such a significant distance between where it's a good condition for renewable power generation versus where the demand centers are. For example, you have fantastic opportunities for solar and wind in Australia or in India, while you have the demand centers primarily up in the North, Korea, Japan, or in Singapore. And how do you transport the energy? And many of us believe in the ammonia vertical or energy carrier in order to transport the energy to the demand centers. But that's fairly unique.
Speaking of Japan and South Korea, cogeneration in Japan and a second gas turbine order for South Korea for the company's power plant technology. What sort of environmental impact will these contributions by Siemens Energy have in those markets?
Well, cogeneration in Japan is, as an industrial nation, importing almost all of their fuels. Efficiency becomes very important, and many of the industrial complexes are using heat as well. So then cogen, where you generate both electricity and heat, of course, is of utmost interest. We recently commissioned one of our gas turbines in a cogen facility in Japan together with Sumitomo Chemical, and where we are commissioning the power plant right now, and we can see that we will reduce the CO2 emissions by about 240,000 tons a year. That's about 20% of that chemical complex emission. So cogeneration have a significant role to play when it comes to energy efficiency and ultimately combating the climate. In South Korea, it's very much go from coal to gas and then ultimately in the future hydrogen. So that's the steps that Korea is taking, and it's super exciting for a company like ourselves where we have technologies across the value chain. And we can see now in the next couple of months the first ever large-scale hydrogen auction taking place in Korea. And we, of course, monitor that together with our partners very, very closely.